Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This week, I'm joined by three of the founders from the Techstars Web3 class of 2024 to help me identify the mainstream adoption path for blockchain technology, including Andrea Miele, co-founder and CEO of The Colony, Fabien Arneodo, co-founder and CEO of SportSyncTech, and Nick Mason, co-founder and CEO of Proofspace. As William Gibson, who was the author of the 1984 book Neuromancer, famously said, "The future is already here, it's just not that evenly distributed." I think of this quote every time I get a pushback from naysayers on the long-term usability of blockchain technology. In the intro to a recent episode with the first group of 4 founders from Techstars Web3, we talked about the common misconceptions about Web3, and I referred to the estimated less than 20 million daily active users of crypto. And crypto in all of its shapes and forms is accountable for the overwhelming majority of the use of blockchain technology around the world today. Recently, Lex Sokolin from the FinTech Blueprint, shout out to Lex, summarized things nicely by pointing out that the daily active users of major blockchain protocols such as Ethereum, Binance Chain, Polygon, and Solana increased from 5 million to nearly 8 million this year in terms of daily active users. Whether we're talking about 8 million daily active users or 20 million, with blockchain, we're only in the ballpark of the number of Robinhood daily active users or the population of the Netherlands. Given how much of my time I spend in crypto and blockchain, to me, it feels like we're already mainstream and that the future is already here. But back to the reality of today and our 20 million daily active users, we have some work to do. We're on a trajectory with crypto adoption that is similar to that of the internet in the 1990s, and if the growth projections hold true, blockchain by association will become mainstream during the 2030s. That's a 10-year range, so what's the timeline to where more of humanity with internet access are using blockchain daily than not? In terms of adoption, what are the things we need to do more of or less of in Web3 to trigger blockchain adoption by Web2 only users? Do they even need to know they're using blockchain? To answer these questions and more this week, I asked Andrea Miele from The Colony, Fabien Arneodo from SportSyncTech, and Nick Mason from Proofspace what they think about mainstream adoption of blockchain technology, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. So, where I'd like to start today, welcoming each of you to the show. Thank you for joining us. And let's start with an introduction to you and the business, the project that you're working on. Andrea, you want to give us an intro to what you're up to?
Sure. Thanks, Pete. Thrilled to be here and talk a little bit about The Colony. I am Andrea Miele. I'm the co-founder and CEO. The Colony is a platform being built on the intersection of collectibles, blockchain, and shoptainment. Our focus has always been and will always be resellers in that world and really providing them with a new tool that allows them to scale and build their business.
Thank you, Andrea. Fabien?
Thank you, Pete. Glad to be here. I'm the founder and CEO of SportSyncTech. We create a sports management system empowering amateur sports organizations powered with blockchain, artificial intelligence, and big data. We are now working with sports camp, academy, sports federation, and more to help them save more than 10 hours per week and per coach, having a better engagement with the amateur athlete and give them back the ownership as well, and acting as a Web3 CRM for brand and sponsor.
Thank you, Fabien. Nick, how about you?
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me on. I'm Nick Mason, CEO and co-founder of Proofspace. We solve persistent and growing challenges with identity fraud, abandonment rates, and data protection by making it easy for businesses to build and integrate decentralized ID workflows into their existing systems. We're in the market with more than 40 customers, 2 of which are targeting multi-million-dollar deployments at a national scale. Broadly speaking, people are hyped about wallets, especially identity wallets, I should specify, especially since the EU Commission's regulations came out. But fewer people, understandably, are hyped about the enterprise infrastructure required to issue and verify credentials to and from those wallets. So in the long run, that's where we see Proofspace's role, a way for enterprises to interoperate seamlessly and globally with standards-based wallets.
Thank you, Nick. So digging right in, we're on a trajectory with crypto adoption that's similar to that of the internet in the 1990s. And we've all seen some of these growth projections that get us all very excited when we see this line of adoption that is showing the chart on how the internet expanded in the 1990s into the 2000s and seeing crypto on a similar trajectory. If growth projections do hold true, based upon the trajectory we're on right now, blockchain by association will become mainstream during the 2030s. What I'm really interested in is what is the timeline to where more of humanity with internet access are using blockchain daily than not? And just looking at today's global population, that would mean, well, we've got something like 5 billion users of the internet, maybe more, maybe 6 billion out of the 8 billion population. So if that were today's number alone, we'd need 3 billion users of blockchain. Would like to get each of your thoughts on where you think this is going to go in terms of at what point do we think more of humanity will be using blockchain technology than the individuals that will not be using blockchain technology?
I think, when we're looking at more broadly when the majority of people in the world will be using crypto, I think we're looking at decades. But honestly, if we take it to an infrastructure level, being blockchain powered, just scratching the surface even of supply chain, I think that's probably much closer. And that's what's going to get us to that majority number.
Yeah, I mean, I come at this less from a crypto perspective, more from a question of the drivers of blockchain adoption. And, if you look at Gartner's 2023 digital ID hype cycle, decentralized ID and verifiable credentials are headed for mass adoption within the 2 to 5 year timeframe. So while not all decentralized ID and verifiable credential products will use blockchain, the majority seem to at the moment, and I think this is a good way to put us on a track towards majority daily usage. And it'll happen not just because these technologies empower people, but also because they solve huge problems for businesses and the public sector and people themselves.
I hear you. And I want to come back to something that you just mentioned there, Nick, and I will do that. Yeah. But Fabien, do you have any thoughts to share first?
Yeah, I think we need to focus more on already seeing what happened the last decade to see what will be in the next decade. If you take, for example, one of the major car manufacturers in the world is Peugeot, PSA, it's a French group. They are using blockchain and supply chain since, I think, 2014, if I remember correctly, to track all the manufacture they are doing for the car. So this is something already big, and this is a professional and business use case. I do think that the mass adoption will come through businesses and not necessarily through customer directly. This is what Nick was saying. I think we have a lot of application coming directly through architecture and infrastructure going through the businesses directly. It can be banking, it can be manufacturing, it can be something else. But I can see in sports level, for example, now, that having and owning their own data for the athlete is something very important. Because even the high-level administration in sport doesn't have access to those data if you're an amateur athlete. So that's a real problem, and the blockchain can solve that problem, for example.
We listened earlier to Lou Kerner today, shout out to Lou, talk about the metaverse. And it's a topic that in 2021, 2022 was all the rage, and it took a back seat for a long time. But there's still this expected future world where, and whether that's 10, 15, 20 years away, where we will have the option of spending our time during the day in a virtual world. And that the individual components of what's being built there, say it is a metaverse, a Facebook metaverse, say it is a Microsoft one, say it is an Epic Games one, may or may not be built using blockchain. I firmly think it will be. I think it's ridiculous to propose something like that is not built on a value transfer mechanism like blockchain. These things could go different ways, but I firmly believe digital ID should be operating using blockchain technology. But is there a 5, 10, 15-year trajectory we have in mind where the logic will prevail here, that this is the type of technology to enable these types of things?
The markets always have a way of choosing the technologies that are best suited for the problem at hand. Identity, when it comes down to it, it allows us to access places. So to access places, we have to be trusted. And to be trusted, there has to be a reliable root of trust. And blockchain does a really good job in the role of decentralized identity of helping to establish that root of trust. There are competing technologies, but it's sufficiently robust that it will take up a significant market share.
Yeah. I hear you. And Fabien, you had been nodding your head on that.
Yeah, I will come back to the EU one, because you were discussing about the trajectory of the EU. If I remember correctly, the date, the EU asked for 2026 for all the digital native brand to have a digital product passport If you read the report, they are not necessarily mentioning blockchain, but at the end they want blockchain. The institution may not know now if it's really reliable to put blockchain everywhere or not. And they are asking some test on some proof of concept or being sure that it can be safe, etc., etc., etc. But just taking that trajectory, that means all the products you will buy on internet should basically have a digital twins, having all the tracking, the supply, etc. Since 2026. It's close to us. It's in 2 years.
That's a good point. Thinking about how some people are describing all of this in the market, it's not the technology behind it, is the actual value proposition and what is the best technology to actually enable that value proposition. Like you said, there's always going to be competing technologies out there in the market, but with what blockchain enables, it just seems like such a no-brainer for a number of these different use cases. On that point, one of the definitions that I really identified with in the past was from Packy McCormick. He's a writer based in NYC. He's now an advisor to A16Z. And he referred to Web3 as the builder and user-owned internet orchestrated by tokens. A huge part of orchestrated, right, is incentivized. All right. If you're going to orchestrate something, you need to be able to incentivize people. You need to, if you're going to orchestrate a bunch of people playing music, how do you incentivize them? Well, if you direct them the right way, they're going to produce some beautiful music, right? I'm stretching with this, but it works, okay? I really dug into incentivization back in 2021 before we ran our first Web3 accelerator. How much of blockchain adoption do you guys think is linked to incentivization? And what do you think is the best way to incentivize the general public without it being perceived as scammy? There are different answers to this question, I think, based upon whether you're coming at this from a pure crypto native perspective or that where you're coming at it from a consumer perspective or, say, a collector and a reseller perspective like Andrea.
I am going to simplify things and come at this from a consumer standpoint, right? Because I think there's probably plenty of people listening to this that are maybe crypto curious but haven't gone that deep down the rabbit hole. I think particularly as someone building a blockchain-based platform that has a community around it that's being built for resellers with communities around them, there is a tangible benefit to incentivization and getting more bodies in the room, if you will. The way that makes the most sense to talk about potentially is to link that to your standard Web2 loyalty-based points program, right? So that could be airline miles, that could be racking up points in Sephora that I then want to use. It's all of those things that are really comfortable and known to a non-Web3 crypto native consumer. When you're building a platform like ours, we look at those standard utility loyalty points program and we think about how can we link this to our ecosystem in a really seamless way. And that translates particularly to potentially our own token, right? That's what we talk about in this space and we hear brands talking about all the time. For us, it's not making a square peg fit into a round hole. It's making it very simple. It's showing tangible benefits and utility where those points do translate into a potential token in the future. And it is, maybe it could be when you look at other platforms from a governance perspective or completely other utility based, but there is a way to blend those two worlds and make it make sense. And I think, incentivization is the key to all of that.
I understand that a lot of the adoption is driven by the economics, but I actually think it's a question of empowerment and participation that ensures enduring participation in these communities. Economic incentives are necessary for us to live safely and happily, obviously, but a sense of community, agency, empowerment, this is where we humans derive long-term contentment and satisfaction. So I think in there, we just heard from Lou Kerner earlier today, how important these factors are in community engagement. So you can have either one without the other. The combination is required for frequent and long-term engagement with a community or with a product. A friend of mine called Jamie Smith, who used to work at Evonym, which was one of the sort of OGs of the decentralized ID world, he's now writing a newsletter called Customer Futures, which is basically all about empowerment technology. And it's worth checking out because I think decentralized ID will tip the balance for mass adoption, as we said, but it's empowerment tech that will really drive sustained engagement with the decentralized space.
incentivization can come in so many different shapes and sizes. In the early days of a DeFi-focused community, or where you are enabling a better solution for people's financial lives, that there were people who get behind that and really believe in it, and it's something that's important to them. And that where, as you mentioned, Nick, participation in something like that and feeling part of a community and feeling part of a group who have the same ideals as you and all want to do that as well. And you kind of need that base of your first 1,000 true fans, as Kevin Kelly says, to prime the pump of that community. And whether that involves a token or not, in a DeFi sense, it absolutely does. But in other senses, where I've seen people building map utilities on blockchain because they need the public to participate in that and to do some of the mapping. And so they use a token to incentivize them to do that. It could just be a point system where the people that get the most points get a free Amazon voucher or a free pizza. I think there's many different shapes and sizes of this. Andrea?
I think it's fascinating to watch other brands that are live in this space using this points incentivization as a tool for marketing. And we've seen some do really well with it. One, just off the top of my head is a brand called Pac Moon that's been building on Blast. And they are empowering content creators, to put out content on their brand that they're handpicking. It's been fascinating to watch. And if it's done well, it's brilliant from a marketing standpoint.
I hear you. Fabien, any thoughts on this?
I have the chance to work with Des Martin. He's the previous sales vice president marketing from Brave Software. And when I'm talking to him, he just explained me how we scale Brave Software from 800K user to 19 million, if I remember correctly. And a big part of that is incentivization. So you give something to have something. I think you can incentivize a lot of users, but at the end is how you can retain them for them to not run away from your project, company, software, whatever. Yeah, I will more bet on how I can maintain them on my ecosystem, maintain them on my community, and being sure that they will continue using my product or not. And more than incentivization.
Yes, and it's smack dab in the middle of this definition of Web3. Well, orchestration is. And to me, orchestration involves a lot of incentivization, but it's very much a real world thing as well, in that enabling users to continue to use your product and want to stick around and continue to come back. Incentivization is a huge part of this. In terms of the killer application for blockchain right now, I know what mine is, my favorite one. What do you think that yours might be? What do you see as the killer application of it right now? And what do you think it might be in 10 years?
I'm probably the less crypto Web3 native here. Honestly, killer app, I don't know. But I think in the future, what it can be interesting is you will not know that they are using crypto or Web3 or blockchain or whatever. And that can be a killer app at the end. It can be something very powerful. And it can be Uber as Airbnb or the equivalent or whatever. But what I mean is we will use an application without knowing the tech in the back, because no one knows what is a HTTPS, // etc. So we don't know that tech. We just choose internet, and it will be the same for me.
I hear you. But Andrea, I can see your product in the middle of Ready Player One somewhere.
100%. I was just going to chime in with, because I also have a daughter, and I know you do, Pete, the similar age. And the amount of money that has been pulled from my bank account into those Roblox pets is ridiculous. And the fact that we cannot resell them and they're not on chain makes me nuts. But I agree, it's going to be an application like that when you link that to one of the forward-thinking wallet providers like Privy that allows for social sign-in and really easy ways to access. That's it. That's what brings that barrier of entry way down and pulls in a mainstream non-crypto native user into blockchain.
In terms of what the killer application for blockchain is right now, I mean, presumably it's crypto, given that's what brings the majority of those 8 to 20 million people into it every day or two. Over the 5 to 10 year horizon, I would lean towards an identity use that links personal AI. Personal AI presents at once some of the greatest opportunities for our productivity, for our happiness, for our, increasing the amount of time we get to spend with our families, all this sort of stuff. But it also presents enormous threats in how the data that trains those models and the permissions that we give to our AIs in order to interact with other counterparties online. There is there will be an acute need and a chronic need for identity in that personal AI universe. I don't know if it's a shorter than 10-year horizon, but I definitely think that's going to be very important.
Yeah, no, it's all moving so quick that it could be shorter than 10 years. I mean, my killer app right now for blockchain is definitely stablecoins, right? A part of the crypto family, but that is really building the bridge here, I think, between Web 2 and Web 3. And that what's interesting is that the US definitions of stablecoins, or not even the US definitions of stablecoins, is that the existence of stablecoins in the US market by issuers like Circle, that in Europe, that's already defined under a regulatory banner called e-money. And so I see that because of the regulatory acceptance of it on this side of the pond in Europe, that yes, there's a regulatory framework coming called MiCA that will help to build even a better foundation for stablecoins, but that I see what can be regulated could be the fastest moving adoption of blockchain. Identity, obviously, being one of them that is regulated, for the most part. And so finance, even sports in France, Fabien, that's regulated, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is regulated.
More or less. So, and regulations around things such as GDPR and everyday commerce. So, and the US have adopted that stance that Europe has taken years ago. So I think I'm thinking about crossing the chasm here and getting into that, hey, we're approaching 3 to 4 billion users of blockchain technology and people don't even know it, in the same way that pretty much every single damn internet user today is using cloud technology. And I do remember back 2013, 2014 even, big banks said no to cloud. Big banks said, we can't do cloud. Sorry, it's not secure. And now we don't even talk about it anymore. I think we're going to get to that point with blockchain. Thinking about crossing the chasm, there are things that I think we need to do more of or less of in Web 3 to trigger adoption by Web 2 only users. I don't think they even need to know that they've adopted it, but are there any things that we can do within this, whether we're part of the Web 3 community or, kind of agnostic to all that, but are there things that we can all do that can help to trigger the adoption just in the way that we talk about things?
It's easy for us to forget the perception from outsiders about the people. Firstly, blockchain equals crypto to most people outside of the space. And perception is that it's a scammer's paradise where no real value is derived. So a rebrand is needed, and it will need to come from trust anchors outside of the Web3 world. So one thing that we could do more of, I would say, which is, it's increasingly happening, but is to pull in more vocal trust anchors that have credibility with traditionally Web 2 audiences.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about just, with what we need to do more of or less of, and maybe it's just less of talking about it. But I mean, Andrea, for your target user group, and that there's going to be individuals using your product where it's completely agnostic to them, or where it's completely invisible to them that it has anything to do with blockchain. And they may or may not even concern themselves with that, because we're talking about a different demographic here. Do you have any thoughts on kind of what we need to do more of or less of here?
So many. And you nailed it. I mean, when we have conversations with collectors and resellers, we don't lead with crypto or being a blockchain-based company, right? We lead with, this is the platform, here are the benefits, here's what we're fixing. And oh, by the way, we can do this because of being on chain, and so on and so forth. I think it's important that we stop creating a new vocabulary, honestly. I think we do that a bit too much in this space. And what that does is it really keeps people out and it gatekeeps. And so the more dApps and, applications and technologies that are built that have blockchain as the underpinning of the infrastructure, but aren't leading with that, I think we'll just make the space that much stronger, because we're going to bring new users, new blood in that will be reaping the benefits, but not necessarily be screaming from the rooftops of, hey, I'm a crypto user and I'm on chain and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And Fabien, thinking about your value proposition in that there's only one sign in your entire deck that SportSyncTech has anything to do with blockchain, and you can't even, it's very hidden as well in that it just says data owned by athlete, right? That's it.
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. For us, blockchain is just a technology layer, nothing else. We use blockchain as a security or to give back the data to the athlete. But when we are talking, can be to government or to sports organization or even club or athlete, we never mention the fact that we are on blockchain. I think that's how we can make a better evangelization of the technology also, because you don't mention it and you don't put a big title around, I'm doing NFTs or something like that, with all the respect I have for people that they're doing this. But it's just the pure use of technology to serve a specific purpose that is to give back the ownership to someone or to have a better security. That's how we are selling it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be funny because when we get to demo day, right, we're going to have some pure crypto Web3 investors in the crowd.
Yeah.
And when you have your investor meetings before demo day, and that folks will look at the cohort of 12 companies and they'll, wait a second, why are this handful of companies in this cohort? And it's that, listen, I am doing this on purpose. Hugh McGurr and I are doing this on purpose and saying that we need to change the world and how it thinks. Change the world, right? How it thinks about blockchain technology and crypto. And we need to show people, listen, these are everyday propositions here. And at the end of the day, this comes down to getting each of your businesses funded in the most appropriate way. Thinking about deep into the future, whether it's deep into the future 10 years from now, when blockchain is mainstream, we're not talking about it anymore. There will be some other technology that people are bigging up and hyping up, and there's tons of buzz around it. And it's not a technology, perhaps, that a lot of people are talking about right now. But say in 10 years' time, anyone have a crystal ball on what they think that technology will be? That people are saying, when will X technology go mainstream?
I have a really wild one.
Yeah.
Scary one. I think potentially the sort of human AI interfacing that we're seeing with Neuralink, the regulatory cycles for those technologies will be really long. The fact that it'll take so long for them to be approved by institutions like the FDA will keep it as a central debate. And the reason for that is that it implies artificial evolution, which, that engages people across science communities, faith communities, political communities. So yeah, human AI interfacing is going to be a big subject.
No, I think you just invented one, artificial evolution. I think that's the technology that we're going to be. Yes, human to AI interfaces, absolutely. But what is the actual part about it that can be quite, call it scary or interesting, is artificial evolution. So everybody look out for AE from Nick Mason, the mad scientist. Okay.
And I should point out, I'm neither a scientist, a faith leader, or a political leader, so I have no authority in that debate.
Awesome. Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're still going to be talking about AI and having, debates on its place in 10 years. I think mainstream has not even wrapped their head around the potential implications. So I think that's only going to become a bigger and bigger part of the conversation as the technology evolves as well.
That is a can of worms unpacked there, because there's so many applications of that across so many different segments of technology. Fabien, your thoughts?
My thoughts. I'm agree with Nick and Andrea on their point of view. And thank you, Nick, for the artificial evolution. I think it's pretty amazing. Quote this one, honestly, copyright it. Now, I would just take a step back on something already existing but not mass developed. It's quantum computing. I think we are talking about technology, and that's the art of the future of technology. I had the chance to have a long talk flying to New York with the CTO of SAP, German company, P company. He was in charge of all the quantum computing for them, and he was absolutely passionate, but I don't understand a lot what he was saying because he was really tech. But what he told me was, honestly, he blew my mind at the end, telling me like in 20 years, when everyone can have access to that technology, it will be a mass adoption for a lot of applications that now cannot be used on a laptop, basically.
Totally.
So I'm going to bet on quantum computing.
All right. Yeah, no, that's another big one where we've only really scratched the surface of all this, right? So listen, we're going to wrap it here, I'd like to say thanks to Fabien, Andrea, and Nick for joining the show. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
For me, my DMs are open on Twitter, NFT for two. Follow the Colony XYZ on Twitter. Call it X if you'd like. Jump in our Discord. Look forward to meeting all of you collectible lovers.
Wonderful. Nick?
I'm Nick _Mason on Twitter, Proofspace with an underscore in the middle on Twitter, and active on LinkedIn, so anyone can connect with me there.
Awesome. Fabien?
Yeah, everyone can connect with me on Twitter. It's Fabien Arneodo. And on LinkedIn also. I'm really active on LinkedIn, so do not hesitate to reach me on LinkedIn.
There you go. All right. Well, listen, thanks, everybody. And I know I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Pete.
That does it for this week, folks. You can learn more about the topics we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. Thanks to Andrea Miele from The Colony, Fabien Arneodo from SportSyncTech, and Nick Mason from Proofspace for joining me this week. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify as it helps others to find the show. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early-stage startup investor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!